I'm going to call this special session, this very important special session, into order. So what I'm going to let you know what this meeting is not. This meeting is not about punishing anyone today or looking into who's at fault, what is this going to cost. We don't know some of those things yet. That will be another meeting later on after we get through this election. And with 2020 still looming in the back of our mind, we want to be completely transparent. And by the time this meeting is over, we should be 99% of out there. I have a whole list of questions that if they don't get answered, we're going to go to these. But first off, we're going to lead off with County Manager Leo Liu to give us what happened and what our options are and how do we make sure that certain things don't happen. And that's what my questions are going to be also. And then we're going to have the other two supervisors here. Also on the phone, do we have Chairman McClure?
Here.
And Supervisor Kavanaugh?
Here.
So we do have everyone here because Mr. Goodman and Mr. Miller are here. So I'm the vice chairman, but since Mr. McClure is out of town, I'm going to be running the meeting. So, Leo, go ahead and let's see what you've got.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Surtee. I just wanted to set an outline for the agenda today. First, we'd like to inform you and the public of exactly where we're at and how we got to this point, so you understand the full details of that, of the process. And then we'd like to go into executive session to discuss the legal options for moving forward. And then we'll come out of that and present and get some guidance from you based on recommendations on how to proceed from there. So I just wanted to just stage it so that the public understands the cadence and the chronology of the meeting. So first we would like to call our elections director, Mr. David Frisk, here to the podium to help explain where we're at. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Surtee and Board. My name is David Frisk. I'm the elections director. I just want to clarify some things just to make sure that everybody kind of understands what happened. But due to human errors made by myself and staff under my direct supervision, ballots were produced and mailed to voters within 7 municipalities without the appropriate local races and measures. Additionally, some voters in unincorporated parts adjacent to city limits received ballots with local races where they shouldn't have. The 7 municipalities affected are City of Apache Junction, City of Casa Grande, City of Eloy, City of Maricopa, Town of Mammoth, Town of Queen Creek, Town of Superior. Now, creating ballots for a primary election can be pretty complicated. We needed to create 938 different ballot styles for the 108 precincts in Pinal County. The election is first created in the voter registration system called AVID, and then ballots are created in our tabulation software called ElectionWare, and then information is transferred from AVID to ElectionWare. Just to kind of explain what happened specifically, there's just a slide, but it's kind of a snapshot from the AVID system. In AVID, every voter is assigned to a precinct, and in many cases, if necessary, a precinct part. Precinct parts are needed when jurisdictional boundaries divide through a particular precinct. For example, the one example up here is Precinct 51, which is divided into 2 parts. The first part, 5107, is within the city limits of the Town of Superior. The second part, 5106, is outside the city limits. If you're a voter within precinct part 5107, you'd get a ballot style 051 PA5, and that should have all the congressional races for District 2, Justice of the Peace and Constable for District 5, Legislative for District 7, and also town local races. And if you were outside that in 5106, you'd get everything except for the town races. What occurred was a human error. Errors were made during the transfer of ballot style assignments from AVID to ElectionWare. AVID, which is the state voter registration database system, performed correctly. There were no errors in AVID. There was nothing wrong with it. ElectionWare did what we told it to do. It produced ballots based on human input. Once the ballots are created, they go through a proofing process to make sure everything on the ballot is right. All the qualified candidates are on there. All their names are spelled correctly. Races are in a particular order, depending on established by statute. Spanish language translations are correct, etc. During this proofing process, which I supervised, I missed the crucial step of ensuring that each ballot style produced had appropriate races on it. Thorough proofing would have prevented this error. Going forward, we have a thorough proofing process in place, which we've tested in preparation for whatever we decide to fix, however we decide to fix this. This was not a system glitch or a computer error or anything nefarious. There's no fault of anyone in the recorder's office. It's my mistake. I and my staff are prepared to do whatever we need to do to help fix this. Additionally, I know there are folks here that were in attendance when the Secretary of State certified our election system and ballots. And just for their information, they came out, they did a logic and accuracy test. They ran our ballots through the machine, make sure everything tabulated correctly. But what they're required to look at is federal and state races. They don't test municipal races, local races. That's the responsibility of my department. So their tests were accurate based on what they looked at. So I'm prepared to hopefully answer any other questions that you might have.
Leo, did you have any more, or are you ready for me to get into questions? Okay. Well, there was a lot of misinformation as we were speculating on certain cures and solutions. A lot of those would have been wrong. One, having a special election only for the municipalities would have been terrible, and we're not going to proceed with that, I don't think, because the turnout would be much lower. Turnout in a primary is already lower than November. Turnout in a midterm election is much than a presidential. So we want everybody voting that would ordinarily be voting in the municipality. So I think that this cannot be a special election, and I think we've moved past that. So the ballots that were incorrect were from precincts that had both municipality and county. So they will all be receiving a new ballot. However, inside the bigger municipalities, some of the ballots went out correctly. One of the questions is, will they be receiving a new ballot, or are they going to stay where they are? Because we don't want two ballots out to anybody. So that would be the first question.
From my understanding and talking with the folks who do the election tabulation system, we can't single out certain folks within the municipalities and count their ballots and not count others. We can't separate those out. So everyone within the city limits affected would have to receive a new ballot with local measures on it. We can accept all the other ballots and count every other race involved, but we'd have to get another ballot out.
So certain folks will, even though they have the correct ballot, they will then have a second correct ballot.
Correct.
So I see a problem with that. I also see that a lot of this information is going to be on the internet and you can check on it. A lot of my constituents that live in mobile home parks don't necessarily have the internet. They may not even have telephones. They got their ballot. They've now left thinking that everything's okay. So how do they even know that there was a problem? And you may be talking 5 in the whole county. You may be talking 500. So I think that's something that's got to be addressed. There was talk that we will reprogram a machine to kick out votes that weren't supposed to happen in a municipality. People no longer trust machines. What if they not only kick out the municipality votes, what if they kick out all of the statewide votes too? So I think that is a concern. So because of that, no matter what solution we come up with, I'm asking that after this election happens on election night, that we then do a hand count of the entire county to make sure who voted correctly and who did not, who may have voted twice, or folks that were outside of the city limits. So someone's going to have a map with the highlighted line there, and they're going to have to check addresses. This person was at 400 yards over the line. He shouldn't have voted. That vote's for the municipalities got to be kicked out, but the governor, senator, representatives, those votes would stay. So I got to think that there's got to be human eyes and hand counts in order to make this legitimate. Even if someone appeared to have won by 30 points, I still think they should be counted, just to make sure. I mean, you look at the candidates out there; they got up their courage to run. It's not an easy thing to even run for even the lowest office. And they set aside the time, they raised the money. I mean, this is a big deal to these races. And a lot of times, if there's 3 seats, one will win by 20%. But you get down to the others, a lot of times in the city elections, they're determined by 5 or 6 votes. So it's going to be utmost, I think, to check every vote, make sure nobody voted twice, and that the legitimate votes did not get kicked out. So those are my questions. I'm going to ask my colleagues and those on the phone if they have any other questions.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Kavanaugh.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fritz, for appearing today and explaining this to us. The vice chairman mentioned looking at the ballots to make sure that a person voted in an election that was theirs to vote in. I don't think we can open a ballot and look at the breakdown of the races. I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Fritz, or perhaps the county attorney would know. We can receive all of the ballots. Well, and then we may have 2 ballots from the same address. I don't think we can then open those to look and see which ballot is valid. Do you know, Mr. Fritz? I don't.
No, I believe I understand what you're saying, Chairman McClure, and you are correct. I think that we, when we do get into discussion of options in executive session, I think that we can talk in detail about options and what we can do to count the appropriate votes and to isolate ballots that should not be counted.
I think
Okay, and this is Supervisor Kavanaugh, not McClure.
Sorry, sir.
And Mr. Kavanaugh, I think that after the election's over, you can look at the ballots. You can't open them up beforehand and look and see if they're legitimate. But after the election is over, when we do a hand count, then you could determine whether it was proper or not. With,
Okay.
with I think, as many observers as would want to observe as possible. That's another mistake from 2020, that there weren't enough proper, unbiased observers watching. Did you have other?
All right, thank you. And Mr. Fritz,
Yes, sir.
do you know how many people the voters have listed their telephone numbers? What percentage? I know that is not a matter of public record. Someone couldn't receive a voter list, such as a candidate, and receive those telephone numbers. But you have telephone numbers. Do you know what the percentage of voters have listed their telephone numbers?
I don't know that percentage, sir, no.
Okay, that might be a solution to perhaps do a robocall to everyone and saying you're getting another ballot. Please don't submit the first one. You're getting a fresh ballot, as well as any emails that we may have for them, is my thought. And Mr. Fritz, when you took office, when you were appointed to this position, do I recall that you were a little short-staffed?
I that is correct. I don't think it's relevant to the discussion at this point.
Well, I do,
but I
because
appreciate.
I'm the elected, and I'm asking a question.
Yes.
The reason I'm saying this for the benefit of the public is Mr. Fritz may have come in, a little short-handed, and these are fairly new people, and so
I had a staff of one when I was hired.
Okay, yeah. So, I can guarantee that moving forward, this mistake is not going to occur again, I would say. So, thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I'm finished with my questions for the moment.
Okay, any other supervisors have questions, comment? Mr. Goodman.
For me personally, and I know it's a lot of the individuals that live in the Santan Valley area or within Queen Creek's planning area. On my ballot, it did have I have the ability to vote at this for which council members, and so that there's quite a few. They're in an unincorporated area, and we have the names of those individuals are on that ballot, which is another problem and an issue that really hasn't been discussed here, that I think we're going to talk a little bit more in depth on some of the solutions to this. As far as staffing and things of that nature, we've been in budgets. We've done a lot of things on our side to kind of beef things up. We've asked for different departments to beef it up, but I know that there's also a shortage of workforce. We've been advertising a lot of our different stuff, and so, but I don't think this is the time to really get into that. But I commend you for standing there and taking the responsibility, which I think we need more of that type of leadership, and I commend you for that. That's not an easy task to do right there, what you just did, and so I commend you for that, and I've gotten privy to some of the information on what we're going to do moving forward. I look forward to having some more discussions so that we can try to get this thing resolved as best as we can. I've had several inputs from the town of Queen Creek, and their attorney has talked to me a couple of times, and so I'm anxious to get this moving forward and do the right thing.
So, Mike, that scenario you said, I did address that in that was talk of programming a computer to kick those votes out and not count them. But we need to make sure that it does count the good votes.
Absolutely.
And they'll have to look at a map. Okay, Queen Creek, not Queen Creek. Where's the dividing line, and see where those votes came from. So,
okay. But the biggest part is going to be communication.
Yeah, Mr. Miller.
And getting the message out.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair. Just a couple of things. One, and maybe I have a misunderstanding, and I don't know if we'll discuss this in exec session and then come out with some kind of solution. But I thought we had one machine that would count the upper portion of the ballot, and it would not count any of the lower part or the council portion. It would be run through a separate machine that would only count the city council races separately. And so it's two different machines. Every ballot is run twice, basically, is what it amounted to, is the way I kind of understood it. We'll get into more detail, I guess, later on. So, but there was another little quirky thing about this whole election cycle that had to do with addressing and living in Eloy but having a Casa Grande on your voter registration card. I don't know how that plays into this entire boondoggle, but we have, when we hot wash this whole episode and we get past it, I need to understand better why that would have happened. I mean, it just doesn't, I don't get the how, if somebody's address has always been Eloy and then all of a sudden their voter registration card says Casa Grande, that is pretty unusual. So there's some other quirky things about this whole deal, and I don't know how that played into then the city council issue. You know, so it could be connected, and it might not be connected. Maybe it's a whole separate issue. So, and we won't really know some of these answers until we're able to just break it down step by step and going forward. I do appreciate you, Fritz, standing up here and telling us kind of what happened there. I would think that we could find somebody in our society that could write a program where we don't have to rely on human input. I mean, it seems like there'd be a way to merge that type of information with a little more accuracy than individual input for each and every voter registration. That just seems like an antiquated way to handle it. But that being said, I'm anxious to kind of understand all our options going forward. I want us to have a solution that is going to be fair and equal to all the voters, and that their voices are heard.
Chairman McClure, do you have any questions or comments?
I do not at this time. I'm listening. I've been privy to many of the conversations on the side, and eager to hear what you have to talk about in executive session so that we can come to some type of conclusion resolution.
Okay. In the spirit of transparency, at first I was told that we could not have call to the public, but I think that if anybody does have any questions that you didn't think got asked yet, that we will open it up for 2-minute, 3-minute questions. Chris, would that be appropriate?
Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair, you have the ability as Chair to take that prerogative and to allow a certain amount of questions and limit the amount of time for any of those questions that you wish to have from the public. I would just ask that we keep in mind that, it may be a lengthy executive session.
Okay.
Because we have several things to go over. And then afterward, we'd like to be able to get some sort of policy guidance from the board as we move forward so that we can put that in place as soon as possible, so that we can get the messaging out to the voting public, so that we can, tighten up and, make sure that we have some of the things that Supervisor Kavanaugh was mentioning, such as how ballots are be segregated, chain of custody, tabulation issues, and those type of things that the board has been asking. So that would be the only request that I'd have, is that just be sensitive that we do have a lot of information to provide you to discuss the options available as this board moves forward. So thank you.
Okay, so at this time...
Mr. Vice Chair?
Yes.
McClure here. So to Mr. Keller's point, if you go to executive session and then you discuss all the options, then return to the public forum so that you can discuss those options in the public and let the public hear, you may cut down on much of your public or call to the public.
So you're saying have call to the public after exec?
I would say that because otherwise you're going to get a lot of questions that you may not be able to answer, and you will be able to inform the public after the executive session, and that may cut down on the number of questions that you have.
I don't think there's going to be a lot of questions. I'd rather have these questions going in so that we can get answers, and then have another, like you said, let's be transparent, have questions now and after before we have our vote. So,
Vice Chair.
Mr. Vice Chairman.
You're, sir, you're running the meeting.
okay, Mr. Miller has a comment.
Okay. Thank you, Vice Chair. Just real quick, maybe I'm not as worried about the questions. I mean, I want to hear the questions, but I think the preference of the cities, the clerks, maybe what their preferences are about time frames is more important to me, so that we can form this around something that works for them as well. Do you understand what I'm asking?
I do. I think there's only one mayor in the audience, so.
Yeah, but we have
Is
some
anyone
city managers here.
Yeah, are they really authorized to speak for their council?
Well, I see some clerks and I see some city managers. Yeah, I would say so.
Some of their legal guys.
So let's have some questions now, if there are any. And because this is too important to worry about 5 or 10 minutes here or there. So let's get it all out there. So at this time, I'll give anyone 2 minutes to ask a question or make a statement.
Chairman Surdy,
Yes.
if I can just add that for the record, Mr. Frisk has provided the visual aid document that we've been reviewing this afternoon to the clerk of the board's office for the record.
Okay. So if you do come forward, we'll need your name and approximate area that you live in.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Hillsbass. I live in the unincorporated area of Santan Valley, and Mr. Goodman is my supervisor. However, I have several friends in the Queen Creek area who have been affected by this issue. Those calls started before 6 a.m. on Friday morning to me saying, Jen, what do we do? And my biggest concern and question right now revolves around guidance to the voters about what they should do with their existing ballots. And I think that is something that needs to happen unequivocally by the end of today. Some of them have already thrown their ballots away because they are concerned that those ballots won't count. So how do they prove when requesting a second ballot that they're not going to use the original ballot and still be able to get their ballot counted, because that is their right as an American citizen? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mahmoud Mohyuddin, 2304 North Cortez Road, Apache Junction, Arizona. I'm in a race for the mayor. Several people have contacted me. They live in a county, and our council members and the mayor names are listed on their ballot, and some of them already voted for us, and they mailed the ballots already. How are we going to control that one? And that's what we need to look into, the double voting, or how you are going to cancel the whole ballot, or just going to cancel the vote on the only one mayor or the council members. And the second thing is, on Channel 10 News, they put it on an article outside. Back in June, they notified the county recorder office or elections office, notified them that's wrong, and that was over a month ago. And then Secretary of State mentioned they have some error, and they notified them. Why we are not proactive? We should have taken action to be not to get in this issue. Hopefully in the future, we'll look into it and make sure be proactive and do it right for the public. Thank you.
Vice Chairman, Supervisors, Leo, my name is Micah Powell. I'm the mayor of Eloy. I'd like to thank you for accepting responsibility for this, because a lot of times as humans, we like to stray away from the problem. We can't all walk on water, but we certainly try. And thank you for standing up and accepting the faults of the department. The concern I have, and I brought it to Supervisor Miller's attention today, is I had 2 residents who already voted. They already mailed their ballot in. They came to our city hall yesterday and said, we want to vote right now. Right now, we need to redo this right now. We can't. They said, we're leaving. We're going out of town. We're not going to be here for this vote then. Somebody lost 2 votes. This could be a record-breaking election for us where we have 5,000 votes, or we can have 10 votes. That's what concerns me. Normally in a small city election like this, our elections are announced, winners are announced during the primary. It's scary to me right now where we're going to be at. I trust you guys. I do. It's unfortunate that we have to do this right now. And I know you guys are going to make a tough decision. And like I said, it's going to be hard. But we need to understand why this happened. I put my faith in you guys. I know you guys, some of you guys personally, and I trust you guys to do the right decision. But we have to make sure this doesn't happen again for the rest of us. Thank you for your time. I know you guys have a tough decision to go forward, and once again, I respect you for doing what you did. So thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, Nancy Hawkins, Casa Grande, Arizona. I'm just going to back up what Mr. Powell said. I have several people that did vote already and left town, so they're not going to be around to receive a second ballot. So if there was any way, I think the initial response was you were going to sequester the ones that came in. If there was any way, and I know Mr. Frisch said there was no way to keep them separate, but if there was some way to do it somehow, because I know a lot of people thought that we were just going to reissue all the new early ballots. And so they voted, or they threw them away, or they didn't know we were going to reissue, and they have, they've done things accordingly. So if there's any way to reissue the ballots and then sequester the ones that did come in if you don't get duplicates, I don't know. I wouldn't want to be here, have your job right now. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair, members of the board. My name is Scott Holcomb. I am the town attorney for Queen Creek. To answer your question, I do believe we are authorized. John Cross, the town manager, is here as well, authorized to speak on behalf of the town. Because if you remember, the county is serving as a vendor to the towns, the municipalities' elections, and we pass resolutions that say we're going to have this election on this date. And I believe there's solutions available to the board that can keep this what it should be, is a regular election. It has a full component of in-person voting. It has those who requested the early ballots getting the early ballots. Those people who get early ballots can also vote, bring them at the in-person voting. And I think as much as possible, the communication, as everybody has pointed out, the communication is critical. And when communicate out that this is going to be a standard election, we are going to have corrected ballots, and that's an important distinction, the corrected ballots that go out. From the town of Queen Creek, I'm very happy that you're not going to try to do a special election because we couldn't. Most of our residents, our citizens, are in Maricopa County. We have two counties we can't have different elections. But I also don't think you need to. That would also be devastating to the residents of Queen Creek, because not only do we have the candidates, but we have a permanent base adjustment that's on there, which is a critical thing for any municipality. And I want to compliment the county staff that I've been working with, the legal staff and the election staff. They've been very cooperative, trying to work with us, and I think we've been able to work through things that will create a solution that we can communicate out and will respond to a lot of the concerns that you have here now. And again, I think the communication must be, there was a mistake, the mistake is being corrected, and this election is going forward like any other election. I think you are in the position to do that, and I hope that's the direction you decide to take. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Hi, my name is Michelle Farrell. I'm in Santan Valley. I am part of District 2 with Mr. Goodman now. I appreciate responsibility being accepted for human error, but I do have to wonder, where is your data people in this? We have, my understanding, serial ID numbers on ballots. We have parcel IDs for addresses, etc. All this should be able to be systemically tied together with your ballot styles and have it go through to where, yes, if you do implement a proofing check, things get caught. Sometimes things get missed. It happens. However, going forward, I think you really need to talk to your data people for a systemic solution. It will keep things streamlined. It will keep it going in process and time. And as you said, there is a way to do it. Every good database has a unique identifier on their records. In the case of individuals within our government, that is our social security number. That is our unique identifier as a person. That's why we put it on our forms. Our driver's license is a unique identifier. That's why when you request an early ballot, you list it. There's a way to do this. You need to have your chats with your data people if you haven't already. I strongly suggest doing that. They will probably come up with some creative ideas for you to be able to tie your, I believe you said it's the AVID system, together with your ballot styles, even potentially together with the AGGIS and parcel ID system that we use with the assessor office and the tax office, et cetera. Tie it together. You get your boundaries noticed. They're in the system. We know where people are for boundaries for purposes of property tax collection. And when things go that way. Might take a little bit of creative programming, but be surprised how creative programmers can be. I used to be one. You've got solutions at hand. You just need to talk with your folks. Thank you.
City Council candidate Darrell Cross, Apache Junction. Lots of big concerns. Everybody is just completely up in arms. A lot of people that have had contact me, they're like, what the heck's going on? Thank you for owning up to this. That is very much appreciated. What do we do about the council members or the council, the people that are running for the office? We've spent lots of money making sure that our mailings came out at the same time the legitimate ballots came out. And now we're having new ballots come out, and people are going to, who was that person? What was that name? Is it possible that we could change all the ballots to a specific color of paper? That way you would identify it right away as being a new ballot versus a different ballot. How are we going to allow people to vote in person? I've had a lot of people reach out to me and say, I want to be able to vote in person. It's very, very important to them. This voting by mail or voting and then dropping it off, they're not a fan whatsoever. Obviously, transparency is the key, and God help you. Do what you can, please. Thank you.
Hello, Robert Schroeder, City of Apache Junction. Well, the challenges that are facing you guys, they're not impossible challenges. We'll get through it. You'll get over it. I think the biggest challenge is the education of the public on what's happening. The solution is right here. I have been inundated with political ads for the past 2 weeks, both attack and pro. This is a way to reach everybody, whether it's through text, which would probably be preferred over calls, because usually the calls are ignored. But this is something that we have a tool in our arsenal to reach everybody. And it's obviously working. I feel like that we don't have a problem. We have a solution. I think this is going to be something that is going to show when everybody works together what can be accomplished. And we will get through this. And I truly believe, I have faith in you guys. I have faith. I mean, the guy here fell on the sword. Although to proofread, staff of one, staff of two, it just takes one to look at it. So I feel like that whatever happens today is going to be in the best interest of everybody. And I feel like we're going to get through it, and everything will come out in the wash at the end of the day. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lisa Sainer, and Jeff Surtee is my councilman. One of the biggest concerns that I have with the rollout, when the initial problem started, was the multiple communication that would say different things. So I am asking to ensure that the council, once that communication and the decision that you make is communicated out correctly the first time, efficiently, and maybe even perhaps finding different avenues on the way to do it. This particular issue not only affects voters that want to do early ballot. What are we going to do about those that are disabled? What are we going to do about those that have already left and already cast their ballots? So thank you for your time.
Anyone else?
My name is Brenda Gifford. I live in the unincorporated Pinal County, north of Apache Junction, and Jeff Surtee is my my representative. I think it's really important to distinguish between how this happened and the solution, and there needs to be a big discussion about how this happened, because falling on your sword, while it may appear admirable, I think is completely a false flag. When Mr. Kavanaugh raised the question about his staffing, this issue goes back way more than a year. This is not a recent thing. There have been problems in the elections office for more than a year. Vicki McLaughlin is our Republican representative in District 5, and we have tried and tried and tried to communicate with the elections office for poll workers, for many, many things, and we don't get calls returned. This has been a very long, ongoing problem, and the staff that was there prior to Mr. Fisk coming left because there was dissatisfaction in that office. So he comes in an election cycle with a brand new staff, and nobody knows what they're doing. And these mistakes were fully predictable, and there's no excuse whatsoever for it. You guys have to figure out how to fix it. And that's the problem that we have to face right now, is how do you fix this mess? But after you get that resolved, then there needs to be a much bigger conversation about why this department was left in this condition, and why people that had been there for more than 10 years were not recognized for their abilities and enticed to stay on. They became so disillusioned that they resigned and left because of the negative culture of the job and the department itself. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to close the call to the public then. Mr. Keller, should we address some of these now, or do you feel we should go to exec? Because there were some great points. I could answer some of these, and some of them did bring up questions that we will have to talk about in exec.
And because of that, I think it's probably appropriate that we go to exec to hopefully address those questions and make sure that legally we can give them the right solutions when we come back out. And then if there's still additional questions, we can address them at that time.
So we could have, after we come out, we could then open this up again. Like I said, I think it's better that we do it all. I don't care if we're here till 8 o'clock at night. You know, this is once every 2 years, once every 4 years. So we need to get this correct. So with that, and everyone, this may take 10 minutes. It may take an hour, but bear with us if you want to see the solution. So I will ask for a motion to go into executive session.
I'd like to make a motion that we go into executive session.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye for me. So the ayes have it. We are now in exec. A motion to come out of executive session.
So ordered.
Second.
Can we have a roll call vote on that? Or just a vote? Aye, yeah, aye or nay?
Aye.
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 McClure, aye.
Okay, I think that's everybody. So we're back in session. So specific things we spoke about can't be repeated, except we can now repeat them because we're now back in session and we all agree to it. So County Attorney Volkmer is going to correct me on something that I said earlier.
Vice Chairman Surtee, Ken Volkmer, County Attorney, I certainly appreciate the opportunity to be heard. There is one thing that I would like to very briefly open with, and that is that most of the discussion that's going to happen right now under Arizona law could have occurred actually in executive session. I want to commend this board and the decision to have this as a very public and transparent process. It's ugly. There may be some eggs that are getting cracked. There's going to be some corrections that ordinarily we don't like to have to make, but I think it's important that the public's questions be answered. And because of this board's leadership, this is going to be a very public conversation. And I will note that I have a couple of my people behind me because, again, it is imperative that everything we say is accurate and correct. So if they come up, I would ask that you give them leave to correct me and say, hey, Kent, you misstated that, because we need to make sure that this board, this public, and everybody watching this knows exactly what's going on and where we're at. And with that, I'd like to begin with your permission, Mr. Vice Chair.
Go ahead.
So, Mr. Vice Chair, the very first thing I wanted to address is you had made essentially a request or a suggestion that we should be able to tie individual votes back to individual voters. We cannot do that. Under the federal law, we are required to make sure that they are all anonymized. If we were able to tie it back, if I were able to essentially pull this ballot out and I could tie it back and say, well, this is Jeff Surdy and I know he voted this, and this, we would actually be committing federal crime. So the ability to specifically go back and pull out an individual's ballot and say, hey, Jeff's got the right ballots, we're going to be okay with this, but Mike, your ballot was screwed up, we're not. We don't have the ability to do that because of federal law, and any attempt to do that would be a violation of federal law. Obviously, I cannot stand here and advocate or suggest that knowingly and willingly violating federal law is appropriate. So it's important that this board know it and the public knows it as well. It's not that we don't want to do that, it's that we legally cannot and we're prohibited from doing so. I guess the next thing I'd like to talk about are really the options that have been presented, and I'm going to talk about the relative merits of all of them. The first, I guess, option that was sort of presented was to convert all of the municipal elections into mail-only elections. I believe it was Mr. Holcomb who said earlier, and he was absolutely correct, the county is a vendor in this matter. We are an entity that is providing a service that we're being compensated for our local municipalities, and that is to run their municipal elections. As the vendor, we do not have the lawful authority on our own to change and just say, hey, we're not going to do what you contracted with us to do. Each municipality, every one of our cities entered into an IGA with us, an intergovernmental agreement. It's a contract, and it's very clear what the terms are. If we were to try to, on our own, convert that contract, into an all-mail, we'd be violating our contract. We would be absolutely violating it, and I can tell you, based on our communications, none of the cities are supportive of that. My team has had the opportunity to speak with each and every city attorney or city representative from all the municipalities that have been impacted. We've had numerous in-person or Zoom meetings with them. And it is made abundantly clear that the city's preference is not to convert to an all-mail. In fact, the overarching message was, we didn't authorize it. We don't want that. Our people need to be able to go in and vote in person. If we convert to an all-mail, we would eliminate that availability. So option one, based on our contract and our vendor status, we've essentially said we should not go down that road. Our clients, the cities, are telling us not to go down that road. We would guarantee litigation. We would guarantee a lot of problems. So the county is saying we don't think that's the position we should go on. The next option that we looked at is it was actually sort of brought forward in a case called Krieger versus the city of Peoria. And in that matter, this happened in 2014. And what happened is a ballot was sent out that left off one of the candidates' names. They did a secondary ballot. That secondary ballot, again, left off that candidate's name. There was one other snafu that occurred. That candidate was very upset. He went to the court. He filed a federal action. And the court said, this is so screwed up, this is so fundamentally unfair that you're just going to wipe that, and there's going to be a special election that is going to be ran, and that special election will have later dates, and we're going to make sure it's fair for all the candidates. When we evaluated that, we thought that might sound like it's a decent solution.
Did he win?
I don't think so, because Ben Toma was one of the other, and Ben Toma is currently a sitting sitting representative. But Our belief was, internally, the county thought, well, that sounds like a pretty decent solution. We can create new dates, new timelines. We can make sure that everything is correct. However, when we went back to our cities, again, our clients, not one of the cities was very happy with that suggestion. Again, as was mentioned by Mr. Holcomb, I don't believe Mr. Stern's here, but he's the attorney for the city of Apache Junction. Both of those jurisdictions have a corresponding election that's happening in Maricopa County, contemporaneous with the Pinal County. It would be impossible to link those up. The other thing we know is generally supplemental elections tend to have less voter turnout. So our cities were expressing, hey, we don't want less people making bigger decisions for us. So again, the city and our client was saying, it's not what we agreed to. It's not what we want. There's all kinds of other legalities. We would have all kinds of additional violations of Arizona revised statutes. It would require us to go to a court, essentially get a court's blessing. Once we received all the pushback and the direct communication from the cities, we decided that's probably not in the best interest of all parties. So there was a third potential solution. And at this point, while it is not a perfect solution, we believe this to be the best solution. And that solution is to send out to all permanent early voters who requested a ballot be mailed to them a new ballot exclusively containing municipal races in the 7 affected jurisdictions. I know it's a whole lot of slow talk and a whole lot of emphasis put on stuff, but there are 7 municipal jurisdictions that are impacted, and none of those 7 municipal jurisdictions, none of the votes are going to be correct if we accept the currently existing ballots. So what our proposal is those ballots will be good for the federal election, the statewide election, the state legislative election, and the county election offices. Those ballots will be valid in those 4 areas. All of the votes for the municipal will not be valid votes. We will still tabulate those, we'll still have them, but they will never be published, and they'll essentially go to a never land. We would have the ability to access them if we needed to, but they would never be reported. Instead, each of those people that voted would be given this new ballot. I know there was one gentleman, I believe he's behind me to my right if I'm not mistaken, who said, why don't we just use a different colored ballot? We have explored that ability for the secondary ballot. There is a bit of a problem with the different colored ballot, and that is we're still in COVID, we're still in supply chain management crisis, and our provider said we don't have colored paper. That's not an option. So we are currently exploring a different way to clearly mark and identify that. What we're looking at now, and again, we have to confirm that this is viable, is but to potentially have like a stripe down the ballot would make it clearly distinguishable from all other ballots. It would also potentially have a stripe on the actual envelope, thank you, that's getting mailed. Again, it would be distinguished. We've looked at having different colors. I think we've talked about a hot pink. We've talked about a neon green, something that would make it very clear that this is not the same ballot. What would happen with those is those would be ran into a different machine at the same place at the same time, and it would be calculated and spit out. So what we would effectively be doing is having essentially 2 different elections that would be occurring at the exact same time. There would be your federal, your state, your congressional, and your county is one election. Your municipal would be a second election. What would happen is they would be on different cards. So if you walked in, you'd be presented 2 different cards. You would fill out those 2 different cards. You'd have to sign 2 different books. It is a greater burden on the county and the county's resources, but is a less burden on the individual voters. We discussed at some point, does it make sense to try to partner with our local cities and to have people in the city elections go somewhere else and vote so we can keep them even completely different locations? The problem we had with that is we run the risk of disenfranchising voters. Not all of our voters have the ability to have reasonable and reliable transportation. Mr. Frisk stood up and said, hey, this was a human error, this is on us. Look, the county screwed up. The county should bear the burden. It should not be the individual voter who is being put out because of it. I can tell this board that this isn't something that we have set in an echo chamber and just went back and forth. We have brought in outside expert consultants. We've consulted again with each one of our individual municipalities. There's their legal counsel. We brought in the experts. We've had numerous conversations with them. We're working with them on the messaging. There's even some concern about some of the UCAVA that we were talking about, which is the overseas votes. That we're not going to be able to be in compliance with those. I know there's been concerns that the AG's office is going to come and beat us up. I've actually had direct communications with the Chief of Staff of the AG just today, letting them know potentially what this recommendation is to the board. I'm not going to soft pedal this. I am not going to tell you that this is a perfect solution. I'm not going to tell you that this is an easy solution. But what we have the obligation to do, and what case law is very clear, is we have the obligation to not infringe on the right to vote. We have an obligation to uphold due process and to make sure we do everything that we can to ensure that voters are able to perform their constitutional duty, and that is to come forward and vote, and to do it in as clean and as an appropriate way as possible. We believe that given all of the circumstances and all the competing interests, this is the best way we can do it. I'm sure the question is going to be asked, is this going to make sure that we don't get sued? No. I think in all likelihood there's going to be a lawsuit. But ultimately what our obligation is to say, look, this is the circumstances we had. This is all of the different avenues that we explored. This is what we believe is the best solution moving forward. The issue that we have is we have to make a decision soon. It's my recommendation to this board, regardless of what direction this board goes, that a decision be made today. That would give candidates ample time, or cities who are our clients, or anybody else, the opportunity to litigate if they are concerned that they don't believe that this is a just and appropriate resolution. Because we can continue to think about different alternatives. We can continue to work with individual providers. But at some point, we have to make a decision, and we have to see if it works. Because if we do, in fact, get sued, if we do, in fact, go before a judge, the judge is either going to say, given the circumstances, he or she will say that this makes sense, or the judge, he or she will say, no, that doesn't make sense, and you need to do X, Y, and Z. If the judge tells us to do X, Y, and Z, we can comply with X, Y, and Z. But the longer we put this off, the greater impact it has to the individual candidates, the greater impact it has to the individual cities, and ultimately our clients. There are a number of other pieces that are moving. I know, for example, I believe there was a gentleman that said, well, we need to text everybody. That is one solution. And we are working with a group called Community Connect, where we'll be able to reach out where we have cell phone numbers, we have landline numbers. We're using that. I can tell you there's a number of messaging that's here. I know we have the media right here to my left. I know there's been a number of media channels that have been inquiring. I know we've got the local Pinal Central, and they serve most of our jurisdictions. This is not going to be an easy solution, but this is something that's going to require digital, traditional, word of mouth, social media, you name it, to get out information. But once this board makes a decision, then we can really start crafting our messaging around that decision, and we can start pushing it out. Because we screwed up, we need to fix it. I'm trying to go through if there's any other issues. I know that Supervisor Kavanaugh had addressed chain of custody procedures and processes. That's one of the things that our election consultants are working. So as we develop these plans, we say, hey, this is what we're thinking. Where are you at on this? And they'll say, ooh, did you think about this? Or, ooh, that doesn't really make sense. So we are working with an outside entity to help give us guidance and to help say, yeah, that works. Fortunately, the group that we've that we've been working with has ran into this issue before. So not this exact issue, but a comparable issue. So they can sort of say, yeah, that's caused problems in the past, or no, that sort of makes sense.
Supervisor, if I could key on to Ken, because one of the things I think that he has not keyed in on is logic and accuracy testing for this new process and how that is handled by the county.
Chris, if you're go ahead and describe it, because that's obviously not my strong suit.
Not a problem. One of the questions that came up is, whether there would be logic and accuracy testing as, was done before for the ballots. And as Mr. Frisk explained, the Secretary of State's office came down and they did do that, and they did look at that for the federal and state elections. However, they didn't look at it for the municipal. And so what we are going to be doing is we want to have that done. We want to provide notice to the people so that they can come and view the logic and accuracy tests. And so one of the things we're going to be looking for is, direction from the board so that we can move that process forward as fast as possible so that they have 48 hours to be able to publish the notice, to get out there and have the public come view so that we can go through and have that process validated so that they are comfortable. Mr. Frisk may be better apt to explain how that process actually works, but I think that is generally the plan, is to have that done, because that's done internally by the county, not the Secretary of State or anyone else.
One of the other time crunches we find ourselves in is it's not as if we can just go to a printer, hit print, and 60,000 ballots print off. We have to go to our vendor. We have to obviously proof what they're actually presenting. We have to give them that information. Our best case time frame is to have them potentially printed off by Friday or Saturday and start hitting the mail. Again, that is a best case scenario. Another issue that we have is this will be unlike any election that we've really done before. I voted since I was 18 years old. I've never walked in and been given two distinct ballots and told to go to machine A first, go to machine B second, come back, put all the stuff in ballot box 1 here and ballot box 2 here. That is not traditional, which means we're going to have to do fairly extensive poll worker training. So again, we're going to have to, I think we heard some people out in the audience today at Call of the Public said, look, we want to serve as poll workers. We've done it. We've asked questions. This is going to take additional training, and we have to know what the plan is moving forward so we can get to adequate training, because we're only about 3 weeks away from actually D-Day, from the day to vote. So it is important, a couple of things, that we're attorneys. Words matter, semantics matter. It's not a corrective ballot. A corrective ballot implies that the whole ballot would be potentially spoiled. There's no spoiling of the ballot. What we're simply doing is we're not, under the proposal that we're making, is we're not counting the municipal votes on those 7 impacted municipalities on the original ballot. Instead, we're sending a supplemental municipal ballot to all of those individuals. That ballot, which again our intention is to have marked differently, along with a postcard or other insert explaining what happened, explaining why you're receiving a second ballot, explaining why you should fill this out and why it's okay to fill this out. And then when it's sent back in, it would have a different look. So if our poll workers were there, the idea is they would be able to see if somehow the wrong municipal ballot somehow got fed into the other machine, they would be able to say, hey, that doesn't make sense. So they would be able to pull it, remove it, because it would look visually distinguishable. So we would have that control. Again, these are some of the things that the consultants had said that we were just trying to figure out what makes the most sense. With that, I know there were a lot of questions. It may be easier now if the board starts kind of answering questions or any concerns.
One, two. So I'm going to condense what you just said. So if you're a permanent early voter, you will get a new ballot mailed out. If you're an in-person voter, you'll just show up in person and you'll be handed the correct ballot. Two correct ballots. If you're in the if you're in the city, if you're right out of the city, you'll get 1 ballot. Okay, I have a question for Mr. Frisk. Because, now ideally, you just said that none of these ballots, the municipal votes from out of the city, will count. Do we have a finite number of how many people are supposed to be voting?
There is a finite number of how many active registered voters live within the municipality.
So let's say, for instance, Apache Junction has 20,000. Obviously, if we get 21,000 votes cast, something went wrong, and some got counted that shouldn't have. So that's one thing that we could watch for. And how will we check that? How will we know that with? So my earlier suggestion for a hand count, do you feel that has any value?
Sorry, Supervisor, let me answer that first question. You asked 2 different questions. The first question, if we do, as we're proposing, not count any of those, that's not possible. The only ballots that we would be counting would be those supplemental ballots. They would only be the ones, again, just for visual sake, the one that has the black line that goes through it. Those first ballots would never be counted, so there wouldn't be that ability to double count.
So everyone is very skeptical because of 2020. So we're intending not to count them. So I'm just saying, make sure they're not counted. So,
but that's why we want to make them visually distinguishable. So you would be able to see, all of our poll workers would be able to see, you would in theory be able to take them, roll them, and you would see the black line in the same place that's continuous. So they would be visually distinguishable from those other ballots. That to me is one of the most important hallmarks, is that as somehow we can identify immediately that it's different. Originally we thought we were going to put a purple box on there, and I believe it was Mr. Frisk who said, "Ooh, I don't think that's going to work because it's independent."
Mr. Frisk, you haven't been through one of our elections yet. I understand that in our last election, we didn't even have poll workers in every polling place. How do we ensure that we have enough poll workers?
We have enough poll workers. We've already we've been working really hard on that, hiring and training all of our poll workers and inspectors and marshals, and we've had a really good response from folks. So
Okay.
I know that some other counties have had struggle trying to recruit poll workers, and
But we're
thankfully
sitting good, so
we're doing
that-
really well.
That's encouraging then. Mr. Goodman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Just wanted to verify what you were stating. In regards to the ballots that you're going to be sending out. My particular situation, which is quite a few individuals in a given geographical area that are in the Santan Valley area. We were given the ballots that had a municipality on it, and we're in the unincorporated area. I will receive, just like they'll receive, new ballots.
You would not.
Okay.
Because it would not be necessary.
Okay.
And let me. That's a great question. I just want to expound so you understand why. Because you don't live within the incorporated city, there are no municipal votes that you should be voting on.
Although it's on it won't count it.
It will not count. So you fill out the ballot that you have. Frankly, if you want to vote for a mayor or you want to vote for city council, it doesn't matter because we're not counting it on that ballot. The only ballots under our proposal that we would count would be that
My
supplemental
wife's going to be
ballot.
disappointed over that, but it's okay.
I'm sure she can send me more email.
She figured we pay our taxes over there in Queen Creek anyway. She should get the vote.
But what would happen is those that should have received and should have voted in the municipality, they are the only ones on that permanent early voter list. In those affected municipalities, they would get that supplemental ballot. So you do not get a new ballot.
Okay.
So it's important that you fill out your ballot that was sent to you. I know, for example, Ms. Hawkins earlier said I had friends that threw the ballots away.
We
reach
need
out
to
to
make sure.
reach out to the recorder's office. There's some affidavits. There is a process for spoiled ballots and the like. But the most important messaging I can give to anybody right now is if you have a ballot, fill it out. The supplemental municipal ballot that we're sending you is only a supplemental municipal ballot. It will not give you another opportunity to vote for gubernatorial candidates, for AG candidates, for your local state representative. It will not give you the opportunity to vote for your local constable or your JP. The document that was originally sent, fill that out, send that in.
Okay. And just a note to our media that's here, you guys are you're going to be a big help of helping us getting the right kind of messaging out there. So if you'll work with our communication department in helping us get the message out there of some of the screw-ups that we've done and the corrective steps that were taking place to help solve the problem that's been created here in our county. Because it is imperative that everybody the votes. I think I'm in agreement with Supervisor Surdy in that somehow even the votes, the tallying of the votes, let's not just rely on the machines. Let's do some actual counting. So I agree with Supervisor Surdy. No matter what it takes, we've got to restore the confidence of the voters in the process. And even though this is a mistake here, this is a corrective action that we're taking place. And I know one of the things in our motion, we need to be giving the financial means behind helping to correct this problem from a county perspective. So that's just some of my thoughts. But thank you for helping correct that.
Supervisor Miller.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Just real quick, I was told in the exec session that I didn't really have the machine portion of this correct when I explained it. So I would like somebody from your office, Kent, or exactly how that's going to work. We have 3 machines and what?
We have, in the elections department, we have 3 tabulators. It's ES&S is the vendor. They're called DS850s. They basically are ballot scanners, and they count all the votes. We have 3 of them. We are going to designate 2 of those for counting all the first regular ballots that went out to everybody, which will be the majority of the ballots. And we're going to designate one of those specifically for the supplemental municipal ballot only, so that we'll basically be, everything will be separate, and we'll be tabulating results for 2 separate elections at the same time.
Okay. Does that make sense?
The other thing I want to make clear is
Yeah, someone on the phone?
Vice Chair?
Yes.
Vice Chair McClure here. And to be clear, the one tabulator would be in a separate area from the other two tabulators, and those special ballots, the municipal ballots, the down ballots, will be in a different area as well. Is that correct?
Well, we'll segregate them as much as we can. The ballot tabulating machines need to be in our secure tabulation room, which is excuse me, secured and under surveillance. But we will be doing all we can to identify that as a separate tabulator so that nothing is run through there that doesn't need to be run through there. And we'll make sure to designate a separate place for holding and storing of all the ballots as they come in as well. So it's going to be an effort on our part just to make sure to keep things separate, but we can certainly do it.
Do you have any other comments?
I understand the secure room. I just want to make sure that people understand that it's a separate area. I don't care if it's a piece of tape on the ground. It's a separate area.
And it's going to be under a camera. I want to also point out that there is a safeguard. If one of the municipal-only ballots would cross over into the regular election ballot machines, tabulator machines, that ballot, because it's not consistent with what that tabulating machine is running, would call out stack that particular ballot. So we would know immediately that ballot is not to be tabulated on that machine.
Just curious how to even get.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Supervisor Miller, you got a question?
No. I'm just trying to absorb all of this.
Okay.
To better understand it.
I'm just curious how it would get from one section to the other. That's the part that would. Why would it even jump from this pile over to this pile?
We're going to have polling places, unified polling places.
Okay. Somebody, human error.
Somebody might grab it and say, I want my ballot in this ballot box.
Okay.
So we're running a parallel election.
But we do have mechanisms in place, is what you're trying to say.
Right, in case it does come over.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman McClure, did you have anything else?
I have one question, and it's been brought up, and I don't know that I've heard it in this conversation. What happens to those voters that have already voted but have left for the rest of the summer? How will they be accommodated, or can they be accommodated?
Mr. Volkmer.
So that's a very difficult question, Mr. Chair. We, by law, are not allowed to send a ballot to somebody that has not requested a ballot. So there are two different people that you're talking that could be impacted. One would be people that have voted early and then went to Europe for the summer because it's too daggone hot here or something. That would be category one. Category two would be people that walked into the early voting centers and voted in person but did not have that ballot mailed to them. We can't send something to them. We're not allowed to forward ballots either. Again, these aren't our rules. We don't get to make up these rules, but we're not allowed to. If you, for example, leave and you have a vacation home up in Show Low and you have all of your mail forwarded, we can't forward your mail from Casa Grande to Show Low. So that's why the messaging becomes so important. All we can do is give them the opportunity to come forward, give them the opportunity to, we can identify if they are, in fact, a person who did vote. We can identify if they are, in fact, a person who, received a permanent early voter list, and we would know that those people's municipal votes would not have counted, so we can provide them additional municipal supplemental ballot. But unfortunately, there will be people that are not going to be able to vote. It is going to take an affirmative action on their behalf. There's nothing that we can do as the county to undo that mistake.
A voter has until July 22nd to request an early ballot. So if we can identify those people and to provide an alternate address where they can be sent a ballot. So there is a group of people that we can catch that way.
Good point. We can send it wherever. If you're just in Wisconsin, we can send it to you.
And so so that just takes a conversation with those people that have left that we are aware of.
That is correct. That is why simply cell phones or mailers or, an ad in the newspaper in and of itself is not going to be sufficient. We're going to have to use every means that we have to get a hold of people. I mean, if we have friends, if we have social media, getting all of this in a unified message is why it's so vital, is to do everything we can to shrink that gap of people who are really going to have thought they had voted and not be able to properly vote on those municipal races. Their votes for the other races will be valid.
Anything else, Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Only to say that it's imperative that friends and neighbors of those people that could be affected that way get in contact with those friends and get that moving. Thank you.
Supervisor Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Surtee. We mentioned something about overseas ballots. Do those overseas ballots include military ballots?
Yes, they do. And there are approximately 55 individuals who fall within those 7 municipalities that requested an overseas ballot. So, yes, that does include military. That's the vast majority.
And I understand the time frame has now expired for ordinary mail to go out for these overseas ballots. But would it be a good practice to go ahead and send corrected for an additional ballot anyway, maybe FedEx it?
Chair, we absolutely do plan on sending those ballots, and we are exploring some sort of priority mail or an expedited mail to try and validate. Again, there's 55 of them. We'll do everything that we can to get those sent out. It's not our intention just to ignore them. It's just we have to give them to them. We have to give them a period of time to digest, a period of time to vote, a period of time to send them back. So it is feasible in a very, very close election where those numbers may make the difference. We may have to potentially delay the results for those results. That's a issue that we'll have to deal with when we get there, but it is not our intention just to exclude them. It's simply we're sending them later than we should have.
My recommendation is we send them a overnight mail and then a return envelope overnight, no matter the cost.
We'll certainly explore all options, and that sounds like a pretty good one.
Mr. Vice Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
Will there be provisional ballots at the polling places for council votes?
Yes.
I'm sorry if I...
No, I just want to confirm. Absolutely. Mr. Frisk shook his head or nodded his head in the affirmative. There will be. The in-person is really going to be pretty standard other than you're getting 2 different ballots. You'll have to sign 2 different books instead of one. There'll be 2 different locations within the same. But otherwise, it'll be the same process that an ordinary voter's used to.
But for the provisional ballot, if they've thrown their ballot out and they come in and they want to vote in person, there will be a provisional ballot for those people, as a normal vote would be.
They have to sign an affidavit, I think.
But there would be provisional ballots.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. But they will be available. I'm being asked these questions by text. I'm getting people calling me here.
So yes, there will be provisional ballots available for those that are appropriate for provisional ballots, and there'll be regular ballots for those that just need a regular ballot. Those are actually kind of 2 different things, and that's obviously you can't see, but Mr. Johnson from my office came up to make sure that I did distinguish. So if you need a provisional ballot, there will be provisional ballots as always. It's there, but there will also be the regular ballot that you can go in and vote for or vote with.
Very good. And one other quick thing. We are not sending a corrected ballot out to the early voters. This is not a corrected ballot. It is a what, Mr. Volkmer?
It is a supplemental municipal ballot. A corrective ballot has a very specific term, and a corrective ballot implies that it's the entire thing, and that would potentially spoil all of the federal races, state races, and everything else. So it is not a corrective ballot. It is a supplemental municipal ballot.
Thank you, sir.
Any more questions or comments from supervisors? Mr. Liu, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Just that we're prepared to implement the solution and put all resources and staff necessary to do so.
Okay. And I think I promised that I would open it up again to the public. If any other questions came up, this is our last chance to possibly get these questions out. Is there anyone?
Brenda Gifford, Pinal County Unincorporated, north of Apache Junction. I think the question that comes to mind is, does Mr. Frisk or the county have errors and omissions insurance so that this is not borne on the backs of the taxpayers? I don't think that it's appropriate for us to have to pay for this debacle. And there was one other question. I think that possibly setting up a phone bank with it being identified as a Pinal County phone lines so that people will answer it, because there's so many robocalls going out that people are not answering their phones. And so if we could get volunteers or even paid people to come in and participate in something that's clearly identified as a county phone bank. But I do want you to know that you said that it is illegal to send out mail-in ballots that have not been requested. And I can tell you that this week I have talked to not less than 5 people who have received mail-in ballots that have never, ever asked to vote absentee or mail-in. And that's just this week. There are many, many more. And so we really need to take this and say we've got to clean up our voter rolls before November. There's a lot of work that has to be done after we get this problem solved.
Anyone else? Our fighter.
Teresa Martinez, Casa Grande, Arizona. You know, in city council elections, they're so close, they're so tight. Are we changing the margin of error for a recount? Are we putting procedures in place, or maybe this is for Mr. Frisk, but are we putting procedures in place for when a race is called and it's less than 100 ballots or it's less than 200 votes shy of what we were going to do with a recount? Because I can see some city council races being very, very close and candidates wanting to challenge based on the error. Have we thought about that?
We're prepared to do whatever this board decides we need to do. So the law requires when we have recounts when margins are close enough. But if this board decides that they want us to do a hand count of ballots or change that margin or count everything, we'll do whatever it takes to satisfy.
My earlier suggestion is do an automatic hand count, just for transparency. Anyone else?
Hi, Jennifer Hillsboss again. I just wanted to say that I really like Ms. Gifford's idea to ask for volunteers or perhaps paid personnel to do a phone bank to voters, and I personally would be willing to do a vote at least a day of my own time to come sit down and call voters, because I think that this is such an important vote.
Yes, Mr. Volkmer.
There was an insurance question. I don't have the answer. I did speak with Mr. Keller about it. We do have insurance. This is a very specific issue, so we're not sure if our insurance covers that. We can look. We'll be able to report back to the board. I'm sure Mr. Liu will be able to report back to you. Just as we sit here right now, we don't know if this is one of those exempted errors that is or is not covered, so I'm not sure. I didn't want that question hanging out and us not at least addressing it.
Mr. Liu, do we have the capabilities of doing the phone bank as an official county function?
Yes, sir, we can. The phone bank.
Okay. Anyone else want to comment or ask a question?
Hi, Michelle Farrell again. If we're going with this for 2 machines with the supplemental to vote, is the time being expanded for the poll times for people who are coming to vote in person so that they have adequate time for that to happen, 1. And then 2, how are you going to handle it for disabled and elderly people who will need additional time and for those machines to properly accommodate for that? Because I'm going to assume we're not having the 2 machines right side by side where I stand here and go, ballot 1, ballot 2. But if you're talking separation, you're going to have people who potentially will have issues moving through a crowd from point A to point B. So you started working through those processes yet? I assume not, but given realities of our population, 25% of the U.S. is disabled outside of our seniors. So those seems to be considerations that need to start being worked through as well, because that is an actual physical limitation for people moving through the system. Thank you.
Robert Schroeder, Apache Junction. With the two-tier ballots, what sort of delay are we expecting to see after the election? Days, weeks? That might be something for you to answer. What sort of delay would we be expecting to find out the results?
Number of questions, doing my best to get answers here. That one will be the easiest. We do not expect there to be a significant delay whatsoever. They're going to be fed into the ballot machine. It's going to tabulate, and it'll be there. So it may be a minimal delay, a matter of minutes, maybe half an hour, an hour, but we're not talking about days on that delay. It's just we'll have, because again, traditionally on the primary, there's less votes that come in the general. So in the primary, we won't have as many votes going through, and we'll still have 2 dedicated full-time machines for those other votes, and then we'll have the 1 dedicated machine for just the municipality. Realize the municipality is about 60,000 or so votes that'll be running through there. So after conferring with Mr. Frisk, we do not believe there's going to be a significant delay. As to the question that was asked earlier, there was a series of questions. So the time that voter locations are open is actually restricted by statute. There's a little bit of flexibility. We'll be as flexible as we can. Obviously our intention isn't to preclude or exclude people from voting because there's more people going there than it's ever been before, and because it's 2 ballots instead of 1. So our intention is to push to the outer limits those time frames that we're allowed to use. And we'll, once you're in line, you're in line. I mean, there's certain things that we can do to be as amenable as possible. There was also, I think, a misunderstanding. The 2 machine, 1 machine, that's actually in the secure room that Mr. Frisk was talking about. When you actually go to our voting polls, you have your poll pad that you fill out. So it should be handicap accessible. All of our locations are required to be ADA compliant. So we don't anticipate there being any disadvantage or any harm done for any people that are perhaps wheelchair bound or have ambulatory restrictions. But obviously every one of our polls does everything that we can to facilitate the ability for them to get in and get out of the area as safely as possible. So we're not expecting that that's going to be a significant burden. It will take everybody a little bit longer, but not a lot. To do the process that we're saying. It'll be a negligible amount of time. We understand it's an inconvenience, but it's the county that's accepting the vast majority of that burden, not the individual voter. I don't know if I missed another question.
Just if I could do a follow-up with that.
Yeah. Then we're going to close this out soon.
And so I think with what Ms. Forney was trying to suggest or was making a comment about was our handicapped individuals and seniors that don't have transportation but we're talking about 2 different issues here, because what we're talking about here is mail-in ballots that have gone out early. And so people that didn't do that, right? And so that's part of what our problem is right now is the mail-in ballots, or the ballots that went out, early voting ballots.
We have 7 days that those people can still request ballots be mailed.
Okay.
And I would encourage them to do that.
Yeah, okay.
So I was just kind of following the trend of the board. So let me rephrase that. If the board requires hand counting the ballots, what sort of delay are we looking at?
I believe we're anticipating having well north of 100,000 individual ballots come through. If we hand counted, it would be in the order of days.
So I would,
if not weeks.
I would think that there would be the first results, and then we just go to an automatic hand count to double check, is what I was meaning. And see if it comes up the same, then we're good. Yeah. And that can be done
Chairman?
At our leisure. Yes.
Mr. Vice Chairman, my question is, in a recount, is that a hand count or is that a machine count? If someone successfully gets a recount?
My understanding is that if it's within certain margins, it can be a machine count, or if it's closer, it would be designated as a hand count. My personal experience with recount is that machine recounts doesn't really satisfy the voters very much. because you ran it through the machine once, you ran it through the machine again, and you get the same result. So a hand count is certainly more satisfying. Well, I have a question for Vice Chair Surtee. When you talk about the hand count, are you talking about a post-certification like audit, where we've certified results, and then we're going to go back and make sure that everything came out okay post-certification?
Yes, since this is uncharted territory, we want to make sure, okay, how did we do that? Did it work the way we planned? Yes or no? Otherwise, there'll be lingering doubts, which we don't want. We want this to be totally out there.
Understood.
Okay. Last chance for anyone to comment.
One quick question, Mr. Vice Chair.
Yep,
This is Chairman McClure.
Yes.
If you do a if you do an audit, a hand count audit, and it comes up with different results than the machine count audit, and it actually throws the vote a different way, and you've already claimed someone as a winner, you're going to overturn the election and change it? I mean, that's just a question.
Yeah, I think we want to strive for accuracy. Yes, then you go to
okay. I'm just asking to make sure that understand that somebody has declared the winner, then all of a sudden, oops, you're not. Just a question.
Okay,
Vice Chair. Sorry.
Sure. Yes.
Vice Chair, how many days do we have after the election that we have to turn those results in for certification?
And you also have
there is a window, I believe.
And also in the city elections, there's also a chance for a runoff as well.
Sometimes. Yeah, there's possible runoffs. And I just wonder how, for hand counting, that could be a compressed window to have to do that within. I'm just...
Supervisor, I'm spitballing a little bit, which is always dangerous, but I believe at the 2020 election, it was like November 3rd was the election date. I believe this board canvassed and then certified like the 24th, 25th, something along those lines. So that would be roughly about 3 weeks from the actual date of voting till it's before this board, and the board officially certifies everything. That's a rough estimate. David was looking into it to verify, but that was based on the 2020.
But my question is that from the primary as well? I mean, the primary, we have to declare something within so many days.
I think I see Chris frantically trying to research that.
I just think that's a short window.
Mr. Chairman, again, bear with me because I am on the fly with Kent, but I believe the correct determination is under revised statute 16-642. The governing body holding an election shall meet and canvass the election not less than 6 days nor more than 20 days following the election. So that is your window.
20 days.
Okay. All right, well, I'm going to close the public comment, which puts it back into the hands of the board. And we don't have any motions written out, so these are going to be verbal. Never mind, there's one behind me. Okay, right here, yes. Any more discussion by the board?
Mr. Vice Chairman?
Yes.
Supervisor Kavanaugh, I think it might be wise to go ahead and schedule the hand count so that it can almost be done the moment the machine count ends.
Yes, to make sure we get under that window. Should we add that to this motion?
I would say yes.
Mr. Chairman, you could. You can add that to the motion. We will also have the ability, with the election occurring on August 2nd, this board already has a regularly scheduled meeting on August 3rd. So you could authorize it at that time, seeing how the election went on the 2nd and the number of ballots and so forth. So either way.
If we have the results that quickly.
Vice Chair, if I may.
Sure.
I think one of the concerns we have is if there is a race upon which there was only a single person who ran, doing a hand recount of all those votes when there was not an opposing party would be a strain on our resources. I think what we would hopefully ask for is if we maybe could narrow it down a little bit more. Again, this is the board's decision, but I'm just looking at the consternation on some of the faces and the practicality. Some of these races, there's not going to be any questions. Some of these races are going to be very interesting, and maybe a differentiation between those two would allow us to focus our resources where they would be most appropriately used.
If someone's unopposed, I would think that'd be a given that you don't recount those.
That's the board's direction. If the board says recount everything, we have to recount everything. I mean, that's the issue we're running into.
Are we going to recount just the municipalities? Or are we going to
Yes.
recount everything?
Hold on. Someone's on the phone.
This is Supervisor Kavanaugh. My recommendation would be that should any person request a recount of their race, that we just go ahead and schedule that immediately and prepare for it now. That might be a better option. So we should prepare for a hand recount of any person who requests it, regardless if the state statute is met for the margin of error or margin of victory.
Chairman McClure, did I hear you also?
Yes, you did. Thank you, Vice Chair Surdy. I would say that you would if you're going to demand a hand count, that you do it only on the contested races. If you do as Supervisor Kavanaugh requested, and I don't disagree entirely, but if you say that anyone requests one, you may have a hand recount and another hand recount and another hand recount. I think you only should do. My personal feeling is that you should only do the contested races if you're going to do a hand recount.
Okay. Supervisor Miller, you were trying to say something.
Well, I just wanted to clarify it. If we're going to do a hand count and add it into a motion or even a future motion, we're only going to hand count the municipalities. Were we going to look at all the other races as well? I just want clarity there.
Thoughts?
Personally, I don't think that's necessary under the circumstance that we're in right now. But if we do have in the other races somebody comes in and would like us to do a hand count, like what Supervisor Kavanaugh has suggested, there's a possibility of that. I think that we need to leave ourselves open to that. But with what we're talking about here, I think to your point, Supervisor Miller, I think specifically stating for the hand count for the municipality.
It'd be contested races in
the contested
races in the municipalities.
If
you're running unopposed, there wouldn't be any reason to count it.
Yeah.
Mr. Keller, you suggested we could possibly do it on the 3rd, which is the day after, but it wouldn't be on an agenda. Can we make a motion without it being on the agenda?
Oh, yeah, we can put it on an agenda.
We can put it on an agenda so that whether or not you need to use it or not, it'll be up to you.
Then we'll just skip over it if not needed. Okay, that could simplify things.
Yeah, I think so.
So it would be just with the motion that we have then.
Okay.
Okay, are we ready to call for a motion?
I am.
I am going to call for a motion.
So with that, Mr.
And just to let you know, we're going to do a roll call vote instead of aye or no.
Okay. Mr. Vice Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve to direct our staff to proceed with putting into processes, creating and mailing out to those on the early vote list within the 7 affected municipalities to send out a supplemental municipal ballot and take steps for in-person voting to provide a supplemental municipal ballot and create appropriate messaging to make this process clear. Allocate any additional resources, and that includes financial resources as well, to support this process.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we do a roll call?
Supervisor Kavanaugh?
Aye.
Supervisor Goodman?
Aye.
Supervisor Miller?
Aye.
Chairman McClure?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Surdy?
And I'm an aye also.
Passed.
So that is unanimous. I don't think we have any other business. So we will be communicating with the staff, and we'll get.
Is that enough direction, staff?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
and our PR team will get that going. So we are adjourned.